Welcome back to the Aubergine Chef. Now today we'll be making one of my slightly original recipes. I took a bunch of different recipes and put them together, so kind of original, kind of not. But it's something I made up called Smores Tartlets. And what it is it's a graham cracker crust, and they're mini, so they're little guys. So it's a mini graham cracker crust, which is then filled with firm ganache, and then it's topped off with homemade marshmallow topping, which is then bruleed or toasted with a creme brulee torch. It's actually a fairly easy recipe. It has a lot of different steps, so it's a little time consuming, but there's nothing that's particularly difficult. So why don't we go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to make is the marshmallow, the homemade marshmallow, because it has gelatin in it, and gelatin needs a little bit of time to set up. Nothing too serious. And the marshmallow topping recipe I'm going to use is actually kind of a variation off of the Alton Brown recipe. So if you're looking for a good marshmallow recipe, I actually recommend going to the Food Network's website and getting Alton Brown's recipe, because I've used it, I have a lot of coworkers that use it, and they just love it. It's actually really, really easy to make. In his recipe, he uses corn syrup, and corn syrup helps prevent crystallization on the stove, so that way you don't have to worry about crystallization that can affect and waste your ingredients. But I took out the corn syrup and I replaced it with more sugar syrup, which is basically the same thing. It just has a potential to crystallize. So if you are a little concerned about crystallization, you can take out probably a couple ounces of the sugar and just put in a couple ounces of corn syrup, and it should be okay. And it should help prevent crystallization. Or you can just use the Alton Brown recipe altogether. It's a little bit. This recipe is also a little bit smaller. I took out about a third of the recipe down because I didn't really need that much because they're so small. But anyway, so in the pot, I have 2.5 ounces of cold water, or actually 3.5 ounces of cold water, 13.5 ounces of granulated sugar, a pinch of cream or tartar, which is going to help prevent crystallization, a pinch of salt, and what we're going to do is we're going to boil this on the stove until it reaches 240 degrees, and I'll get more into that in a second. On the mixer, we have half an ounce of granulated gelatin, and most people will have this kind of gelatin in the grocery store. It's the Knox brand gelatin, and each packet is 1/4 of an ounce. So altogether, there's 4 envelopes. So altogether, there's 1 ounce. So you only need like 2 ounces or 2 packages to put on the mixer, and as well as 2.5 ounces of water in the mixer with the gelatin, and that's going to allow the gelatin to bloom. And if you remember from some of my really, really early episodes when I first started the Aubergine Chef, I did a lot of gelatin-related desserts, and the gelatin needs time to bloom so that way it can activate. You can't really use granulated gelatin. You can't just like stir it into something because it doesn't work like that. What you have to do is you have to let it soak up some water for a period of time, like 3 to 4 minutes, nothing major, and then you melt it down slowly over low heat. What we're going to do is we're going to do it gelatin style. What we're going to do is we're going to put it on the mixer, let it bloom, and then we're going to add hot liquid to it. And that's kind of like how Jell-O does it, right? Because Jell-O, you boil water on the stove and then you add it to the gelatin mixture. So it's kind of like that. It's a little bit different than the early episodes that I did, but we're still using unflavored granulated gelatin. And we're also going to need to put in a little bit of vanilla extract, about less than a teaspoon. You can add a teaspoon if you want. It's not that serious. You can just eyeball it. You don't need to measure it. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring this over to the stove. And before I do that, let me point out some things to help you so that way you can succeed. If you decide not to use corn syrup in your recipe, you do run the risk of crystallization. And what happens in crystallization is there's like some granulated sugar on the side, or something happens that starts this chain reaction in your simple syrup that causes it to turn to basically a giant sugar crystal, or tons of like sugar crystals that just don't want to melt. And this can be a little disheartening. It can happen to anyone. It happens to me all the time, and actually can happen over time. So let's say you made simple syrup and put it in the refrigerator to use for your iced tea, and you notice that your simple syrup one day is crystallized. It just happens. The way you can prevent that is you can add an acid, like we are. Our acid is a cream of tartar. We did that all the time in school. It helps prevent crystallization. Another thing you can do is you can wash down the sides, and what you do is you take like a pastry brush, and a cup of water, and you just run along the edge of the pot as it's cooking in the early stages, and what happens is the water runs down the side and brings the granulated sugar back into the pot. So that way those granulated sugars that won't melt because they're not in the liquid, they won't start crystallization because they'll be in the pot now. What I like to do is I just like to put the lid on top and allow and let the steam and evaporation and all that do it for me. So what happens is when it's boiling in the early stages, the steam is hitting the lid, cooling off, and coming back down and then running down the sides. It takes a little bit longer this way, but at least that way you don't have to worry about running around and watching your pot and brushing down the sides. It's a little bit easier this way. So why don't we go ahead, cook this on high, or boil this on high on the stove until it reaches 240 degrees. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to take it off the heat and then bring it over to our mixer with our bloomed gelatin, and we're going to pour it into that and kind of whip it up. Almost kind of like Italian buttercream if you think about it, but not, because we're making marshmallows. So why don't we go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and bring this over to the stove. Okay, so once your sugar has reached 240 degrees, go ahead and turn your mixer on low speed. Bring your hot bubbling sugar on over and slowly pour it down. Try not to hit the whip. You can hit the side of the bowl. It shouldn't affect it too much, but try not to hit the whip. And then go ahead and just let it whip up for about 12 to 15 minutes on a medium to high speed. Okay, so after about 12 to 15 minutes, your marshmallow topping should be light and airy, should be white in color. The bowl itself should be cool to touch, so we can go ahead and take it off the mixer. Don't forget to add in about the teaspoon of vanilla extract somewhere in the mixing process, probably close to the end, so the last few minutes of the mixing process. Go ahead and add in the teaspoon of vanilla extract so it gets all mixed in. Now see, this is the reason why you want to try and avoid hitting the whip. I don't know if you can see that. But if you can see, there's like some sugar strands that have formed on the whip, and you don't want to have a lot of those, because what's going to happen is that they're going to break off hitting the side of the bowl, and then they're going to make your marshmallow topping chunky. It's the same thing can happen on the side of the bowl. You can see that the sugar has hardened on the side of the bowl because the bowl was cold, but at least it won't make your marshmallow topping chunky, because the whip won't hit it and it won't break off. This, however, these are like fragile little strands and they'll break off no problem. So keep that in mind when you're adding in your sugar syrup. Now the next step that you want to do is you want to get all this stuff off of the whip in the bowl, and you want to put it into your prepared piping bag. Now my piping bag has an 804 round tip or straight tip in it, but you can use a star tip if you want. You can also keep this marshmallow topping in a container until you're ready to use it. And if you, later on in the episode, I'll say this again, but basically what we're going to do is we're going to pipe it on top, and if you find that your marshmallow filling is really, really stiff, we can pop it into the microwave for a few minutes to soften it up with the heat. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make the graham cracker crust. We're going to scale up the graham cracker crust recipe. We've got about 13 ounces of graham cracker crumbs here, and to that we're going to add 4 ounces of melted butter, and we're just going to stir that in with our hands until all the crumbs are moistened. Okay, once the crumbs are moistened with the butter, we can go ahead and form our shells. Let's take some of the graham cracker crumbs, and you want to make sure you pack it in. And you're trying to form a tart shell shape. So just make sure that you push it in and pack it around so it's nice and tight. And then, once you're finished with all your shells, you should make about 36. Might be able to make a little bit more than that. Once you finish making all your shells, we're going to bake them at about 350 to 375 degrees until they are nice and solid again, which should be about 10 minutes. And you'll notice that they form like a very solid cookie shell. Then we're going to let them cool down all the way, and then when we come back, we're going to make the ganache, the firm ganache. Okay, so the next step to making the s'mores tartlets is to make the firm ganache. So we're going to combine 13 ounces of chocolate chips. I'm using semi-sweet. You can use whatever kind you want. With 7 ounces of very hot boiled heavy cream. So once your heavy cream comes to a boil, just bring it over to your chocolate chips and just stir them together until they come together. Okay, once you get a nice smooth ganache with all the chocolate pieces melted, the next thing you want to do is you want to fill the graham cracker crusts that you baked off. Now mine got a little bit dark around the edges, but that's okay, nothing too serious. And it's very easy, just pour it in. And I was actually able to get 48 tart shells instead of 36, so I'll make that change on the recipe when you can download it from my website. So it's very easy. Just fill each of the tart shells with a little bit of the ganache. Then once you fill all the shells with the ganache, you can the next step is to refrigerate them for about an hour so the ganache sets up. So I'm going to go ahead and finish filling all my shells, refrigerate them for an hour, and when we come back we'll be putting on our marshmallow topping. So once your ganache is cooled in the refrigerator for an hour, I actually let mine refrigerate for about 2 or 3 hours so that way they're nice and firm. All you really need to do to take them out is to stick a knife into the center of them and then pop them out. Now some of them get a little stuck on the edges, like this one does. All you have to do is just wiggle it around until it comes out. It doesn't really take much effort. Now keep in mind that the crust, because it's not all the way to the top, and the ganache is so centered in the middle, that some of the crust might break off. But that's okay. Most of the graham cracker crust will stay on. Alright, so to finish off your your s'mores tartlets, you're going to pipe on some marshmallow filling. Now I actually had to take the marshmallow filling I had earlier out of the bag and then put it in a bowl to microwave it, just because it just got so hard and so stiff. I think my sugar might have been a little bit too hot. If you do have this problem, it's easy to microwave it. Don't microwave it for any more than like 10 or 20 seconds at a time because it gets really soft really quick. It may not look like it, but make sure you try stirring it before you put it in for another round in the microwave, because it gets really soft and really sticky really fast, and you don't want it to lose all the volume that you put into it. So there's different ways you can do it. You can use a star tip. I'm using an 804 round tip, and one thing you can do is you can just pipe from the center and kind of create like a little poof ball. You can also try and create a nice tight spiral. Now you can see that some of the graham crackers are starting to break off on the sides. So just keep in mind that these are pretty fragile, but they look kind of neat, and they're very rustic looking, so they don't have to be super special looking. So I'm going to go ahead and finish them. I've got about 48 of them to do. You should have about 48 as well. And when we come back, I'll show you how to brulee them. All right, when you're ready to brulee your tartlet, go ahead and turn on your torch. Make sure you have a metal spoon nearby, and you just want to lightly darken it. Okay. Now the reason you want to have a spoon nearby here. Here's an ugly one that I messed up. Is if you accidentally set it on fire. Not going to want to set on fire, now is it? Well, if it sets on fire, you can use your spoon to put it out, so you don't have to blow on it. So I'm going to go ahead and finish bruleeing the rest of my tartlets, and then when we come back, I'll show you what they all look like together. Okay, so here are our finished s'mores tartlets. Now, as you can see, they're just slightly brown, so you don't want to go too heavy on it. And the best way to torch them is to hold the torch kind of far away, so that way just the tip of the flame is barely touching them. So that way you don't get too dark and you don't burn the crust. Keep in mind, too, that while you're heating these up, the chocolate underneath the marshmallow is also getting warm. Not all of it, but some of it. As you can see on these ones right here, you can see that it's actually very soft and very warmed up because of the torch. Alright, so that's how you make the s'mores tartlets. Now, keep in mind that you want to make sure to brulee your marshmallow and put your marshmallow topping on as late as you can before serving it, because the chocolate inside is going to get soft, so they're going to be hard to travel with. Plus, you probably really should refrigerate the ganache. And you really can't refrigerate the marshmallow because the moisture in the refrigerator will just make the marshmallow melt. So try to do your marshmallow as late in the process as possible. Now, I know that we did our marshmallow way in the beginning, but that's because I was planning on serving them right away. If you want, you can wait until the very end to make your marshmallow and just pipe it straight from there. Also, keep in mind that you can microwave the marshmallow topping. Just put it in a microwave for like 5 to 10 seconds at a time, so that way it's not getting over melted and losing some of that volume. And make sure to try stirring it in between each time to make sure that it's ready to go, because sometimes it'll hold its shape even though it's nice and soft and ready to go. So anyway, I hope you learned a lot today. Thanks for watching, and remember, the Aubergine Chef demystifying dessert one recipe at a time.